Yeah, she had a doctor appointment. Let's wait for a little bit later. We'll start the meeting. Um, Looks like we have a quorum. Everyone except Supervisor Morehouse is here and she's excused for this meeting. So approval of the minutes from February 19th. Supervisor Kinnear. Brooke seconds. Any corrections or additions? All in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Opposed, say no. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Public comments. We have one for sure, right? Neil, you want to?
I'm Neil Cook at N723 8520th Street, Menominee. And I spoke to you a few meetings ago about spreading human waste on the ground. And there was somebody from DNR and somebody from one of the plumbers. And since then, I've contacted the DNR. And at the last meeting, they said there was only 100 and some septic land spreading sites in Dunn County. So I asked for a list of those 100 and some sites, and they emailed me 129 sites. And I went through the soils percolation map and plotted those sites, and I found 6 that don't meet the percolation standard of 6 inches an hour. And I found 35 that were questionable. They were so close to the not meeting it or meeting it that I just said questionable. And then I talked with Sims Plumbing, and he said he would be delighted to take his municipal waste to the municipality. He said it's costing him time and money, and he's sometimes 1 to 2 weeks behind because of collecting waste. And when I looked at the 129 sites that were sent to me, I noticed Sim's name on top of each page. And so I contacted DNR and I said, you got Sim's name on top of those 129 sites. He said, those are sites that only Sims can have. So Sims has 129 sites. And I said, well, there's 4 other plumbers in Dunn County. I'm assuming they all have some 100 sites each. And he said, yes, they do. So 25 years ago, I think I came here and I said there were 400 sites in Dunn County. And I plotted those and found 150 sites failed to meet the percolation standard. And so because of that, we're contaminating the groundwater, and we're also contaminating the wells that might be near these sites. Will become a health problem for those people living in those homes. And all over the nation, it's become a major problem. States, counties, townships have banned spreading human waste. They require them to take it to a municipality. And so I guess what I'm asking you to do is go to the county board and ask them to make a resolution to send to the state legislators recommending that septic waste be banned in Wisconsin. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. We will consider that, and I know in our comprehensive planning process, this may be coming up as an issue too. So we really appreciate your staying on top of that. So we'll probably agenda that sometime for consideration by the group. Any other public comments? Tom, anyone here? No public hearing today, so Staff reports. Starting with you, Heather.
Good morning. In February, I attended the Wisconsin Register of Deeds Spring Conference, which was a one-day meeting in Madison, and it was held in conjunction with the Wisconsin Counties Association Legislative Conference. And the speakers at the Register of Deeds Spring Conference included the Department of Revenue, State Vital Records Office, the Secretary of State, Atolis Law, and then we did hear from the Wisconsin Counties Association as they reviewed their legislative agenda. And then I think I've spent most of the month just kind of trying to stay on top of a lot of the legislative proposed legislation, I guess, legislative initiatives or proposed legislation that have been circulating that affect our offices. So just trying to stay on top of that if anything's going to be moving on and making sure we address things that affect our office. That's all I have.
Any questions?
Just curiosity about the legislation, vital records over 100 years old. Seems, what's with that?
So I think that legislation was brought forward by a genealogist that would like to be able to publish records. So genealogists can access records over 100 years old. They can purchase copies, uncertified copies of any record, but they can't share those records online or publish those records. And so they would like to change the date to be a rolling 100 years. At right now, the mark is at 1907. And I guess the Register of Deeds Association feels that this could potentially open up somebody that's 100 years old, their birth record then could be published. So we would like to maybe extend that to be 125 years or, just to protect someone that's 100 years old, that their birth record isn't out there for everyone to see.
Thank you. 100 sounds like a lot, but I guess it isn't. Thanks.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Tom.
Good morning, everyone. My report is up on the screen here for the committee. You can see where the land divisions have occurred in the last month. The plat of Sand Creek Woods that went through the committee here was eventually recorded. So 6 new parcels were created in Sand Creek. Maps of survey continue to come in, remonumentation work in the town of Menominee. I attended a steering committee meeting and then also assisted Corp Counsel with drafting of some legal descriptions, involved the county transfer station and then some proposed utility easements near the neighbor's nursing home that were prepared a few years ago but were never recorded. So just opening all that up in conjunction with the land sale between our building and Prevea, or the former Prevea site. So, and then I have a budget summary report. I will note the budget report, there's something not quite right with the way the formulas are set up, at least in my budget, and it spills over into Tammy's and Chase's as well. So hopefully in the coming months, this report will be a more accurate reflection of where we're at. So I don't have anything else to add unless there's any questions. Oh, one thing I should add is I have posted the survey technician position that's been vacant since December. The deadline to apply is today, and we've received 4 applicants to this point. So we're going to be reviewing those and hopefully conducting interviews here shortly. So
are you still like remonumentation? Are you still like doing those all the time, like in summertime, or is that just when time allows?
we work on remonumentation year round. Greg from my office, that's his main priority. I assist when I can. I wish I could help more, but office work keeps me in. But Greg, that's his main focus area. And some of the corners, it's best to get to in the wintertime when we have ice. They're in wet conditions, swampy areas. So yeah, it's year round. In the winter, we're not I guess, as productive, I would say, just because we're dealing with frost, we're dealing with a lot of snow. We can't get off road sometimes. So it makes our work a little more difficult. But yes, we do work on this year round.
So is that for, are you like half done with that, you think, or a quarter done, or?
So we have 2,800 corners roughly in the county that were set in the original survey in mid 1848 to 1853. By percentage, I believe it's over 98% of those corners have monuments at them. But keep in mind, some of those monuments were set by private surveyors, and were not, let's just say, properly reestablished. So they all have to be reevaluated. We typically work township at a time. So we go in, and if we find a monument that was set by a private surveyor in 1987, and we find that they missed some crucial evidence, we may end up adopting a different position. So it's really hard to look at that percentage and say, wow, we only have 1.5% of the corners in the county left to go. It's a little misleading. So, but in the overall grand scheme of things, most of the public land survey system corners in the county have monuments at them. Whether or not they're correct, they're all being evaluated case by case.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Okay. Tammy, yep.
Good morning. I guess kind of just running through our staff report here. We've had a lot of activity as far as permits, walk-ins, several phone calls that are coming through. Some kind of things in the near future that I see coming forward is, so that CBRF, that stands for Community-Based Residential Facility. So that's the new term for like a nursing home assisted living. So we have a facility that's looking at getting established actually in the town of Colfax. Would require rezoning and then a conditional use permit for that activity. So I would see that coming. We have several non-farm requests, and that's from that IA and PA zoning district, Town of Grant, oftentimes Lucas, Wilson, those areas. So kind of our activity that way. I guess moving on, Board of Adjustment, we had, again, our first hearing back in February. That went very well. March, just this Monday, I thought that discussion went, fairly well considering the how the court case, remanded the case back to Board of Adjustment to issue that variance. I think we had a really good discussion and hopefully learn some really valuable lessons through that process. I guess kind of moving on, in your packet, I included, and we can jump ahead to there. The housing work group attended a workshop that was hosted by the Manufactured Home Association. We went to Chippewa Falls, toured the different housing options. And I thought this publication was really good to help change how we communicate, not calling mobile homes anymore, using common term, modern terms being manufactured home to the modular homes to these cross mod. The cross mod idea is, kind of the Wausau home. Things are built in sections and then constructed on site. So again, just some updated terminology that I thought it would be helpful to share as we communicate. I think we try to reflect that in the survey that went out, try to get away from using mobile homes and using that manufactured home. I mean, pricing is, it's affordable housing, and then realize a single wide, manufactured home and the cost of them, upwards of 80,000 now becomes, I don't know, affordable housing anymore. So there was that. And then, staff continued to do a lot of training this last month, getting through our POUTS and our soil testing requirements. And then finally, I just want to thank the committee for all their help with the survey. It did go live March 10th, and it's open until the 7th I have some flyers and some handouts that if anyone would like to take, hopefully get the word out there, spread the news about the survey, and keep that project moving forward. I don't know if there's any questions.
What did you say about the town of Colfax? I must have missed that or something.
Yep, so there's a proposal concept going on right now for a community-based residential facility. So similar to like an assisted living facility, senior care facility that will be as in concept phase, it would require rezoning and then a conditional use permit in order to be cited.
Any idea of how many beds you're talking about or rooms or?
They're looking around 10. So,
That's the first I've heard of it, so it's kind of nice to hear about that.
yep. So, yeah, it'll be, our rules, if they stay under 8, they can operate as a permit. But as soon as they exceed 8, then they have to go for a conditional use permit and then go through that rezoning process. So
Hmm.
it'll be more to come on that one.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, you have a lot of nice information here, Tammy. Thank you. I'm curious, the BOA livestock facility, which one is that? Or, yeah, can you give me information about that? I hadn't heard about that.
Correct. So we received an application for a livestock facility expansion in the town of Tanger. This would be Denmark Dairy. And I'm finalizing the review with Wisconsin DNR as far as their livestock siting process. And this will be forthcoming as far as a conditional use permit with our Board of Adjustment.
And I thought we didn't have much to say about CAFOs.
You're correct. So that's why, they do have, as long as they can meet, there's different worksheets, so air quality, groundwater, their nutrient management, as long as they can address each worksheet item that's established by state statute, which is administered by Wisconsin DNR, then we are very limited on our review or the conditions that can be applied to an operation. So hope, and once we get those details finalized with Wisconsin DNR, then I'll feel comfortable moving forward with having that hearing at the county level.
Thank you.
Monica.
I just wanted to highlight for the other committee members, the training that Tammy and Jim put together at the BOA meeting. It might be worth your while to listen to. She put together some really nice slides. It pertains to the process the court process, if somebody questioned our decisions on variances, what that would look like. I was surprised by a number of things. And so I found it very valuable. But I do have a question. You mentioned here that you're working on updates to the Chapter 13 ordinance. That's a zoning ordinance, right?
Correct, yep.
What are you looking at?
$1 million. I'm trying to think of the low hanging fruit. I would really like to have the committee entertain a contractor storage yard and start talking about what that looks like and come up with a better definition, look at allowing it in all zoning districts but with different standards. That's, if I looked at one of my violations, if I reoccurring, it's, existing operations that have now been put into like an R district. And so now we have non-conforming contractor storage yards. So even the person who has that landscaping business, who maybe has a storage trailer, is technically in violation of our ordinance. So I would really like to entertain that one, bring that one forward. There's a few minor updates I'd like to propose for ADUs and revisit our fee schedule. Unfortunately, our fee schedule is adopted by a well, that'll be a resolution, not necessarily in our ordinance, but I would like to bring that one forward also. And of course, if there's anything the committee has suggestions on that you would like us to look at sooner than later, I welcome them. But I'd like to bring it, probably a good 6 or so amendments at a time, just to keep us up to date. Mhm.
Thanks, Monica, for mentioning the video. That'd be good to watch. Anyone else? Anything else? Mike, you. No. Okay, thank you, Tim. Heather, are you doing the report today, or is Chase online?
I'm here.
Chase, you're up. Sorry.
Yep. Morning, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to participate remotely. Yeah, the report's in the packet for this month. A couple things to highlight regarding our ag performance standards and farmland preservation program. At the top of the report, that we're looking at applying for or evaluating whether we should apply for a notice of discharge grant for a particular farm, and then for a different farm, trim grant, targeted runoff management grant, or DAC reserve funding. So those are both cases where we're looking at trying to achieve compliance with our ag performance standards, both in state code and ultimately, ideally, with our county ordinance as well. But there is potential for seeking of grant assistance to allow those to take place more smoothly. A couple other things to talk about. Heather's in the room today as well. We'll cover the groundwater report after this. But then just looking at the Wisconsin Land and Water Conference was held a couple weeks ago. One of our youth posters, or three of our youth posters, made it to the state contest, and one took third place in the grade 10 to 12 division. And then the last thing I just want to highlight would be the Red Cedar Watershed Conference took place last Thursday. There was 204 attendees to that conference. 20 of them were middle school students. And while I'm on the planning committee for that, we're still evaluating feedback from that conference, but several of you also attended as well. So I thought it was well attended, given our thoughts were it was going to be lower attendance at first, but I think it pulled through, and hopefully there was some good conversation. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have about my report.
Thanks, Chase. Any questions for Chase? Thanks. Yeah, thanks for your work on the conference, Chase. It was very good, as always. Anything else? That's all. Okay. Thanks, Chase.
Thank you.
Let's see. Seven C, groundwater private well monitoring report. Are they going to do that?
That's the real reason I'm here, yes.
Okay. All right.
So we, as you all know, we did the big, massive thing in 2023, and we had some money left over from the ARPA funding that the board allocated for it. So we took that and we did roughly 300 wells last summer. And this past summer, we partnered with this Eau Claire City County Health Department. The lab we went through the first time was Wheel. They're over in Stevens Point. They did a great job. But when you're running out of bottles, it's a lot easier to zip to Eau Claire than it is to zip to Stevens Point. So we worked with them. We got some more money last January, and so we were able to expand upon it a little bit. So we did the well samples. We collected 263, and I partnered with some groundwater folks over at the Department of Ag Trade and Consumer Protection at the state level to kind of target some of those areas that we know are more susceptible down in the southeastern corner of the county. They collected 36, and their report is massive. So that is linked in my report if you'd like to view it. It covers all of the work they did across the state last year. Dunn County was one of the counties that they highlighted. So we are, I think, somewhere in the page 60 range. Don't quote me on that, but they do a really good job of explaining exactly what they're testing for. Like me, they were testing for nitrates. Unlike me, they were testing for a whole slew of pesticides. So similar goals, different fine-toothed comb. For my stuff, I did nitrates and metals, and as we kind of would expect, you see higher rates of nitrate contamination down in the southeastern quadrant of the county. The nitrate sampling map that I have for this report isn't entirely indicative of what the groundwater actually looks like across the county, just because that spatial bias comes into play. We have a lot more samples down in that, Rock Creek, Springbrook area. Peru did not get any samples taken by me, and this is just my data, because everybody who was signed up for my program in Peru actually went with the DATCAP folks when offered. So I have access to their data. I am going to be looking at that and continuing them in this year's program when we're looking at trend analysis. But for this report with my data, we didn't have anything for Peru because the state took care of them. So like I said, this one isn't really a good indicator of what groundwater actually looks like. Up in Sand Creek and Grant, for instance, I believe between those two townships, we only had 6 samples total. So 1 or 2 really high wells will skew the whole result. That being said, coming into this year, we have money left. So right now we are currently working on recruitment for kind of a mix of repeat testing, so I can start getting a pretty steady yearly analysis going for some folks, and then we can hopefully over the next few years start looking at trends. Are things going up? Are things going down? Are things staying static? What's going on? And then the education component is just getting folks to test their well. So even if folks haven't signed up in the past, we're hoping that we can get somebody, maybe they don't understand how to do it. Maybe they don't have the money to do it. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're shooting for 300 wells again this year. Right now, as of this morning, I have 107 folks signed up. And so we've been kind of social media, flyers. The clerks are yet again being super helpful across the county, getting the word out. So if you know anybody that wants to sign up, feel free to send them my way. I have paper applications that they can fill out. They can email me, text me, call me, pop in and say hello, any number of things to get on the list. And the other thing that is changing this year is now that we have our big fancy lab in-house here with the health department, I'm working with those folks directly. So we're going to be just testing for nitrates, and we're going to be doing it through our own Dunn County Health Department lab. So that is the short and sweet of what I have. If anyone has any questions.
Mike,
Thank you. You referred to it a little bit,
Mhm.
but we've tested the 1,000 or so wells in 23 and then did a great job last year, another 300 this year. So test, are all those results on our county, what do we call it?
The groundwater viewer?
Yeah.
So all of the stuff from 2023 is, I need to touch base with our land information officer. She was out as I got the data for this program, so I need to touch base with her and make sure that it did get uploaded. I would guess it probably has because I sent it over and she's usually pretty swift with those things, but I don't have a 100% yes or no.
But the plan is to put it on. And how about the DATCAP information too?
The DATCAP information, I need to get that formatted in the way that can get uploaded to our site. But yes, I'm probably just going to pull the nitrate data though, because the pesticide list, I believe she had 163 different pesticides. We don't have that on our map. So it's just excessive data for our purposes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. But that's a great website. But
Yeah.
that website also has all the old data too, right?
Mhm.
That we had. So we've got a lot of testing data
Yep.
right now. So how long are we going to just keep testing before we say, okay, now we've got all these results. What are we going to do about it?
So that goes back to kind of what are we using to analyze trends? So the data that's on our website right now, it goes back to 1985. And that is any number of testing. That could be private labs, like, folks have submitted to me to get into our website. That could be mandated testing. And so we don't really have much of a normalization, if you will, with that data. We don't have a linear thread to go through it. Well, especially with nitrates, there's a certain level of seasonality to it. So nitrate is really fond of water. The two chemically bind, and basically what happens is the nitrate in December is just kind of hanging out up in the frost line. And then come spring snowmelt, it kind of goes down. So it's not uncommon to see spikes in mid to late spring. So I can't compare data that was collected in December to data that's collected in May. So with this program, what we're trying to do is when I'm collecting the data is this roughly the same time every year from the same wells. So if I collect, say, your well over 5 years, then I'm comparing apples to apples. So I can actually look at, are we seeing any sort of meaningful change? Now, that's also why I'm doing all of the town halls and pestering some folks that I know are going to be fairly receptive to it about testing this repetitive nature. Because then I can actually have the data normalize and I can actually start making some level of meaningful conclusion instead of just looking at the data that we have across the county in this massive 3D system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But then the question was, how long will this take before we can actually start using it to make decisions?
Generally speaking, the general understanding is more in this case, but usually you can start kind of combing out some trends after about 5 years with this data, give or take. Now, if I have money and I can continue testing, then we'll keep going. Partially because we want the more data you have, the more reliable your trend is going to be. But also, as we're working on the back end in land and water, you guys see different things that highlight that Chase puts on the reports, with the manure closures and different things like that. We can start looking at are there impacts being made? Can we start seeing these impacts? And it kind of goes in with some of the other water sampling that I do across the county up in the northern reaches. So.
Are you able to track individual wells? For example, if individuals started back in the 80s and so can you look, oh, here's this one well with 15 different samples. Are you able to go back and access those in your data?
I should be able to, yeah.
Okay, just curious. Not that I'm saying you should go back and do that for every individual well. I know your time is limited too, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I add to that?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for the questions. Heather did a good job answering. I want to provide a few more thoughts on that. I think the data we have is in its current form is a nice starting point when we're considering comprehensive planning, land and water resource management planning, or even other land use, decisions. Our data is, I think sufficient to at least identify where we have some resource concerns. The trend analysis is a good component when we're trying to think about, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Depending on its location and all the variables that are at play. The other thought I just want to bring to everyone's attention is, the trend analysis and the data for land use decision making is an important goal with the monitoring program. The other goal is the education piece, and Heather mentioned this in the beginning of her discussion, was that we have a number of people that have no idea what their water condition, air quality even is. So by us as a county offering this resource, we're hopefully providing some awareness for individuals to make their own personal decisions based on the quality of their water as they discover it. So I think monitoring long-term has a number of different values and goals. I guess it just depends on where we see the funding landing in the future, if any, and then where we want to be spending our time using those funds. So just want to provide a couple more thoughts on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Chase. Gary, go ahead.
Question. Did you say that the health department now can test for nitrates here?
Yep.
And that just lately, because before we had to go to Colfax or
Yep.
Stevens Point is.
I believe they got all of their fees and certifications approved December, January of this year, or December of last year, January of this year, I believe. So they are now approved to test for bacteria and nitrates. Those are the only two things they're certified in currently.
Are they gonna charge them like, some departments like, to use it? Or-
Yeah, so when you're doing analysis, you have to buy certain things, right? There's of course the instrumentation, but there's also, it's called a reagent, and so you have to do some chemistry.
Oh, okay.
And so things like that. And from my understanding, they are intended to be self-supporting. So yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
It's really good to know. Just thinking, is there any, can you think about whether or not in the future it would make sense to consider some of the issues that Neil Cook raised today about spreading of land waste in certain areas? And I know that's a bigger chunk than you want to bet on right now, but just wonder what your thoughts are on it.
Oh, that is a question. Um, so there's a plethora of answers. I think that it's always good to consider and look into things. There's the desire to ban, and I completely understand that. But anytime we want to look at banning things, we have to ask what happens. You know, septic systems don't just go away. We have to figure out the alternatives before we just go start banning things. And I don't have those answers. I'm not going to pretend that I do. Um, but if we want to ban things, we need to have some solutions on the front end, in my opinion. And then there's also state level, and I'm not super well versed in the state level legalese there and whether or not we as a county even can do things like that. I think it's always good for us to, you know, as county to voice our concerns and opinions with our state legislators, but I think there's a lot more questions on the back end.
No, I was more thinking, um, if we decide that there are, I mean, Neil's could possibly be identifying sites that have susceptible groundwater percolation issues that are being used as septic disposal sites. And whether or not it would make sense to, at some point, ask ourselves, well, would it be possible to evaluate through testing whether there is actually any problem here that we need to worry about? Just a thought.
Yeah. So in the past, when I first started here, I believe it was 2018, 2019. I started here in 2020. My predecessor did a small concentrated sampling in partnership with the health department to kind of look at some testing that we call them indicators. And it was only about 20 wells that got tested down in the southeastern part of the county. And it's probably the closest analog that I can think of to the kind of testing you're looking for. And it's called pharmaceuticals and personal care products. As the name implies, that's what you're testing for. That can give us a better idea of some rough estimate of where contamination is coming from. You test for things like metabolites of caffeine, artificial sweeteners, certain pharmaceuticals, and that can tell us, is it failing septic systems / municipal waste? But the concentrations are nowhere near high enough to be able to parse out, is it a failing septic system or is it municipal waste?
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, one other question. Is Menominee the only place that'll take sewage like from like a private septic system, or can you go to Colfax or Boyceville, or, you know, that's something that's gotta be worked out too. How many
Yep.
places can actually take this stuff?
I'm not entirely sure, honestly. Maybe Chase knows, but he might not either. It really depends on the infrastructure of the plant itself.
I'm just kind of curious if like Menominee could take all we could give them, or they got a certain number they could take and then that's all they could take too, so.
I mean, I guess in theory, my knee-jerk reaction is that a sudden influx from the about half of the population of the county
Yeah.
would probably be a bit much, but I'm not 100% sure on that. That's just kind of my rough gut check, if you will.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. That's great. Ad hoc committee recommendations. Chase, you want to go through this?
Yeah, in your packet is the groundwater ad hoc committee recommendations progress report that we've provided in the past. There are a few things highlighted in blue on the right-hand columns that are maybe more recent activities since the last time we revisited this. I think, a lot of these areas that are marked in green or yellow, green being that significant progress is made on them, or some other sort of decision has been made at this point in time. So for example, the very first one is adopt a stormwater management ordinance. That is something that, can always be up for consideration as the committee would request. I think at this point in time, we've tried to evaluate the county staffing capacity for that sort of thing. And that's where we've kind of just tabled that for now. A few other things that we are looking at or continuing to work on. Certainly the comprehensive plan was mentioned in the ad hoc committee's recommendations. Clearly that's underway right now for an update. So I think groundwater playing a role in that is very important, and another point for citizens and the committee and others to engage with. A couple other things would be looking at the agriculture sector and looking at economic development and water quality strategies, looking at grazing as part of the producer-led or farmer-led watershed effort. And I think what we're seeing right now, especially on the heels of the Red Cedar Watershed Conference, is some of those we'll see where those discussions lead to as far as the economic side of it and its impact to water quality. As far as grazing, we have a grant with the Hay River Farmer-Led Watershed Council for 2025 to begin some grazing efforts there. So I think there is a future that looks a little bit brighter for incorporating grazing and managed intensive grazing as part of the producer-led effort, which then hopefully has its water quality impacts long-term. With this, I think the rest of the report is a point in time here is to revisit it. It's one of the many balls that we're juggling all at the same time. So I guess I would ask if the committee has specific thoughts or requests as how we might proceed for any of these items. Please let us know. Otherwise, we do revisit this from time to time. A lot of the work that we are engaged with right now seems to fit within many of these recommendations. So with any hopefully quality program, it takes time to develop, and I think that's where we're at right now. But I'd welcome any feedback from all of you at this point on any of these items and any suggestions on where we might consider going as we plan out for 2025, and certainly with the comprehensive plan and the land and water resource management plan updates.
Thanks, Chase. Any questions? Supervisor Kinnear.
First off, I noticed it said with the comprehensive plan part of this that we want to make sure we incorporate these things that we're looking at here in the comprehensive plan. I know it's a general plan, but all of these things are things we probably want to look at and make sure they're covered. Then I have a question for the committee and for staff. Tom, if you go up to the very first page, it talks about citation authority. And I'm just curious what our committee thinks about citation authority. And I know we have it a little bit in some places and staff too. One of the things was in the past having citation authority, gee, they're going to start fining everybody, or the other part is how else we're going to get them to do it. So I'm just curious where we're standing there as far as what we think about it.
Mr. Chair, I could set that up a little bit for you, what I know and where we're at, if you're open to that. Basically, we have citation authority written into our Chapter 10 Agri-Farmer Standards and Manure Storage Management Ordinance. That was something that we worked with Nick Lang, former Corp Counsel, on to when the update to that ordinance was written. However, it's my understanding that the overall citation authority granted to implement those particular ordinances that have that has not been developed. So I know that was on Nick's list at one time, but right now we are not using that citation authority. And if I think about ways that we could use it in the future, certainly there is a number of requirements, and Heather mentioned this a little bit in the previous discussion about authorities granted to us through the state legislature and what we can and can't do as far as being more or less restrictive. And I think, certainly through our ag performance standard ordinance, we still have the requirement to offer cost share in certain instances. So barring any decline of a formal cost share offer to achieve compliance, that is when citation could be more effective. But I will say that citations are not our preferred or go-to method to achieve compliance with ag performance standards or any other water quality standard. I think it is a tool of last resort, in my opinion, and certainly we are of the approach to seek is a cooperative relationship building effort to achieve these things as possible without needing to go to citation. But the Department of Natural Resources has needed citations and used citations in Dunn County in the last couple of years for some runoff events, and it does, it does play a strong role in pushing and achieving compliance eventually. So I'll leave it at that for my 2 cents and let the committee discuss.
So it seems to me like we have, as Chase said, we have had a number of situations that where we have been able to work with the DNR, or where they've been called to our attention or our staff has identified them, and working with the DNR and subject to the limitations of cost sharing, has been able to find creative solutions in partnership with the farmer. Doesn't feel like it's an urgent need to me right now. I don't know what the rest of you think. I mean, seeing general agreement that it's not a priority at this point in time. So
Then that's one more thing off your plate, Chase.
we could take that off there. Do you want to? Should we do that? Well,
I don't
we
want
don't have it. Yeah.
I don't want to remove it. It should still sit here, but if we don't think it's anything that needs to be done, we could turn it green.
Yeah, I think that's the case. We don't want the corporate council to proceed with drafting the ordinance at this point in time. No. Anybody else? Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could just respond to that.
Sure.
I think it's important to keep it on here. Certainly we can turn it green. I also think at some point in time, it should be addressed in some fashion. I mean, we have an ordinance that describes a tool that we can't use. So it might lead to some confusion by those that aren't in the know in the future as to what authorities we do have, or if we are not using a citation authority in the future, raising question as to why we're not doing that. I think at some point it would be good to clarify that in the ordinance, whether that is a tool we want to pursue in the future. But I think at this point in time, what I'm hearing is we will keep it here and wait for better days to discuss it.
I think that's the consensus. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chase. Comprehensive plan focus group discussion. Tammy.
In your packet, I just did a quick outline of this topic. Susan will be here in in April, the second week in April, to further this conversation as far as the focus groups. But I wanted to get it started and start thinking about what that process looks like, since the committee is the steering committee, the advisory group to that process of the comp plan. We really would like your input on what these focus groups should look like and how you would like to see them function. So for example, who should be at the table? What does the committee's role look like with these focus groups? And then reporting back, obviously we're early on in the plan, but yet the information that's gathered through these focus groups will really be critical to shape, your decision-making process or what goes into the plan. So I don't know if the committee has initial thoughts.
Why don't you share with us what your thoughts are first, and then we'll respond to that.
It's always interesting to decide who should be at the table, right? So when we have a focus group, we're talking 8 to 12 participants. And who are those people? And their voices. And I always I always like to look at a focus group of saying who are we missing? You know, sometimes we always have the same faces, you know, as part of these groups. And I would love to say that let's have one new face or have a goal to have someone different who hasn't been at the table before. But again, that's just my, opinion is just trying to have authentic conversation and hearing new voices. So, the committee could direct staff to, here's the people that we think would be good resources in the housing. Uh, the committee themselves can reach out to individuals and say, I'd like you to be a part of this process. So that's kind of the who should be there and how do we want to select those individuals to be there? Because we're looking at the month of May, for our first start of our focus group meeting. So we're not that far off to try to get this process worked out and try to get someone to commit to this.
So, one question, do you see the focus groups as a one meeting opportunity? Or is it, potentially more than one meeting?
That's a good question. We have regional planning budgeted just to do one meeting. If through the process, I think I'm open to continue to have a second or a third focus group meeting if it's determined by the group that it needs to happen. We would have, maybe some flexibility in our budget to get regional planning a part of that process. Otherwise, myself or other staff would be able to assist with additional meetings. But for now, it's just one meeting per group.
And the outcome you hope to get from that is recommendations for the plan?
Correct. So, for example, like you have that ad hoc, the groundwater topic, the group would utilize existing plans, implementation, plans. I guess I don't want to overuse that term, but utilize the existing documents to help shape what the future activity should look like, identifying the concerns,
So
priorities.
part of it is identifying concerns and prioritizing them, I suppose.
Correct. Yep.
But is part of it, suggestions for future action?
Correct. Yep.
So that, and then the only thing I reserving it up is it seems like that could take more than one meeting to get for people to get familiar with the topic, get comfortable with perspectives, and then actually think about, okay, where do we go from here with this? Might be, I don't know, might take a little while.
I think that's fair, right? Because we get presented information at a meeting. It takes time to process it if we're all human. So sometimes we think of it after the fact and then want to further have a conversation about it. So I think that's fair to say, do we need multiple meetings? And we may, or do we want to allow that process to happen if it's identified, depending on that focus group? And this will be helpful for Susan to prepare then for when she comes in April also to maybe, identify what that structure could look like for the committee. Maybe that will help. And one approach to identifying is we could do kind of a mapping, stakeholder mapping with the committee. We can bring other individuals in just to even talk about the who is who and who should be in each focus group.
So if we did that, and we did it at our next meeting, that wouldn't be until mid-April, I'm guessing. No, late April, actually.
So Susan was going to come to our second one in April because our survey results were going to be available. So she was going to present at that time. We could certainly do a stakeholder mapping
At that time.
at the first meeting in April and then utilize that information to help at the second
Okay.
meeting in April, if that's something the committee would like. I could create a spread, and even share it again ahead of time. And if the committee members want to add individuals, we can start even as staff identifying kind of some different players and start gathering some, input and feedback on that. Or,
Mike,
If you can do that in 2 weeks. One of the things is, we want to keep this going,
correct, yeah.
but we also want to make it manageable for staff.
Well, I could put a spreadsheet together pretty quick and put titles in there and then let you guys add names as that process is easy and names have come up already.
Okay.
So it's not
would it be okay if we started with that, asking you to put together a spreadsheet and
and I'll share.
identify any, and maybe a little a little more specific definition of what the group is expected to be focused on. And then any individuals, residents that you have been identified so far as possible participants.
I think that's a really good question. It's fair to say, what are we expecting from this group? That's a good question. Yep. And then the third, or another item I'd like the group to consider is that other topic. So we still have an other focus group that we have not decided on a topic or area that we'd like that to cover. So ones that are reoccurring again are the energy, the alternative energy topic, climate change. I mean, climate change will probably come under our natural resources, water, but we can certainly cover that. We can also look at more about intergovernmental as far as, again, like the septage. I mean, that can encompass a lot of different topics. So
Does the water, I mean, should we add I mean, right now you don't have natural resource, unless you define the water one as being natural resources too, but it's sort of similar, but somewhat different topics.
yeah,
Anyway, when you get to the definition, that may come up.
and we do have two agricultural related ones. So natural resources kind of
Fits in there too.
fits in that category. So I will clarify though with even Susan just to confirm what direction we want to cover with, under the two agricultural ones.
I've been hearing a lot of concerns about loss of farmland across the county. Is that something that would be discussed in the two agricultural ones? That's under
Correct.
that umbrella? Okay, so it
Yep.
doesn't need its own thing. Okay.
So this whole topic of intergovernmental cooperation is an interesting one, I think, because that we're starting to see that happen almost organically with the townships getting together to talk about emergency services and fire and stuff. And we are, I don't know, what have you at one point in time in there, didn't you talk about a county, was it's countywide sewage?
Oh, yeah, the sewer and water plan. To
Yeah.
evaluate, it kind of goes in hand with the question that came in earlier about capacity, right? Where's the capacity for our septage to go? Does the city of Menominee have capacity? I mean, so it could encompass different topics, right? It could encompass that. It could also, where can people go? Where do the communities, like Downsville, for example, how much capacity do they have available to add to that system?
So that could be, that would be ultimately, that very well may involve some kind of collaboration or some kind of formal agreements between entities to arrange for that. I know that yesterday, Adam Akola did a presentation to the CR&T committee about his work with villages on economic development and him trying to identify the establishment of a loan fund that would be available to them for and resource and actually reaching out to them. But just another example of where, you know, if our, especially the rural areas of our county are going to be resilient going forward, we're probably going to have to create some innovative opportunities for collaboration. Otherwise, we're not going to have services and people will not move there, and we will lose economic development, and we will never win a state basketball championship. Okay, anybody else have thoughts on this? So what do you think about that, about other topics? Do we talk about that at our next meeting too?
Certainly, and hopefully we get a good survey
Some
response
come up
rate
from
that will maybe tease out, that it'll be just a blaring in our face, like this is what we need to cover. That would be in the perfect world. So I think that's fair, is, you know, just to continue just to keep your ears open to what this might be. Reflect on some past topics that would be helpful to make sure we're thinking ahead for.
And intergovernmental cooperation, as you brought up, the EMT and so forth, that they're talking about. But that's one of the elements. And as we go through these, we're going to be talking about the individual elements one at a time, aren't we?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, intergovernmentals is definitely an element of a comp plan. So it could work itself out in theory that way.
Groups, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so I will get some spreadsheets out to everyone, and we will at least start focusing on what's expected of each group, and then hopefully keep that conversation going.
You want to talk about any of this other stuff, or line frequency, or put that off to, or just tell us what you're thinking?
I mean, so as far as the committee, these will be evening meetings likely with the group, the focus groups. Does the PMD committee want to be in attendance? So I don't think we need an answer now, but just to
Okay.
start really
Think
thinking
about
about what you want your role to be. I would say that you guys are right now as an advisory. So I would, look at, your attendance being to observe. And if you wanted to facilitate some part of it, I think that would be, a welcome opportunity for the committee to consider also as some role of facilitating, but ultimately, making it so that you guys are attending. And that's just kind of open meetings law, just in general, just that if I know that the committee wants to attend every focus group, then I want to make sure I publicly notice it properly, so.
Okay, we'll think about that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Tammy. The review, Tom, you got something on here. 8A, I believe is where we're at now. Review and action on a variance request.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. So there's actually two separate variance requests. I have them agended separately, and we will have to take action on each one separately, but I'll present them both in one staff report. So let me get down. I'll bring something up on the screen here for you of what's being proposed, and then I'll get into my staff report. Get this on here. So this will be the main focus of our discussion this morning, are these two proposed parcels. So the applicant is Mr. Paul Hayden. The property address is E9701 State Road 85. We're located in parts of Government Lot 5 of Section 2 and Government Lot 10 of Section 1, Town of Rock Creek. So it's very near Caryville, right on Highway 85. And I can bring this up on the GIS map as we go along, if I need to. So the applicant is requesting the following two variances. One, allowing for the creation of a new lot that does not have dry land access. So dry land access is defined as wheeled access at or above the regional flood elevation. This entire property is located in a floodplain area. You have to go quite a ways outward from here radially, a quarter mile or more, until you reach land that is outside of the floodplain. So the entire thing is in floodplain. A little portion has been removed, which shows up on the map here, but right around the main residence here, there is a portion that has been removed, and we'll get into that as we go on. So the first variance request is to create a new lot that does not have dry land access. The second one is to create a new lot that does not contain a minimum of 10,000 square feet of contiguous land lying above the contour line, which is 2 feet above the regional floodplain line. A lot there in that sentence, but basically you take your regional flood elevation and then raise it 2 feet. At that level, you have to have a minimum of 10,000 square feet of contiguous area, buildable area. So the unique thing about this property is there's already a home there. So it's a little bit different perspective on it. So a little background, the Paul Allen Hayden Revocable Living Trust owns lot 1 of a certified survey map. So there's a certified survey map underneath this. And apologize for back and forth here, but this map is on the books right now. This is what the trust owns, lot 1. Down here is Highway 85 and it extends north all the way to the Chippewa River. Again, this parcel that was created and recorded is entirely within a mapped floodplain. So what they want to do is come in now and divide this lot. So let's get back down to what they want to do. Okay. Continuing on. So the so there's a certified survey map there that the trust owns. They also own approximately 22 acres of adjoining land to the west, which is unsurveyed. The property is currently unzoned and does contain areas of mapped wetlands. As I had mentioned, the entire property is located within a mapped floodplain except for a small area around the existing home, which was removed from the floodplain. And I have the FEMA form in here that accomplished that or that speaks to that. That's all, it's in the packet here. The subject property is served by a driveway coming off Highway 85. That driveway is visible on air photos dating back to at least 1938. So it's been there a long, long time in the floodplain, serving the property. The applicant would like to divide and reconfigure that underlying CSM that I just had up here into a new lot as shown on here, lot number 2. And then the balance will be designated as an outlot. It doesn't have any road frontage or access. So the new lot's going to be about 1.63 acres, contain the existing house and several of the outbuildings. There's a renter right now in this home, and according to the project surveyor who I spoke with last week, this renter would like to purchase the home. He's been there a long time, would like to purchase it. The trust, though, for whatever reason, wants to retain the rest of this. They want the home on a much smaller piece of land for whatever reason, which is the reason we're here today. We're dividing this lot. So this will become the new lot. It's going to greatly reduce in size, contain the existing home, the driveway, and then the trust will keep the balance, which will be designated as an outlot with the remainder to the west here, which is about 22 acres. So, so the creation or dividing this existing lot into lot 2 and outlot 1 triggers chapter 16. So the county land division ordinance applies. The two of the standards in the ordinance, 16.46 sub 4 states all lots must have dry land access to a public or private road. The proposed new lot 2 on here does not have dry land access to State Road 85. The driveway is located in the floodplain. It's not above it. The second part of the ordinance is 16.46 sub 14. All newly created lots shall contain a minimum of 10,000 square feet of contiguous land lying above the contour line, which is 2 feet above the regional floodplain boundary line. The proposed new lot does not meet this standard. So if the two variances are not approved, the existing driveway is still there. It's going to continue to serve the property. And it's been serving the property for quite a few years, at least 87. Additionally, the existing house and associated improvements will remain despite the fact that there is not 10,000 square feet of contiguous land above that 2-foot freeboard contour. Approval of the variance of both variances will allow the applicant to divide off the existing home and related improvements and place them on a smaller, more manageable parcel. Driveway serving its intended purpose. To comply with the ordinance standards, the applicant would need to place a substantial amount of fill on the property and within the right of way of the state highway. They basically have to bring up the approach, that driveway, at least a couple feet. So if we look at the variance requirements, we look at hardship, right? The current buildings have existed on the subject property for a considerable amount of time, and the use of the existing driveway, which has been adequately serving the property, predates the adoption of Chapter 16. In order to comply with the ordinance standards, I mentioned a lot of fill would have to be brought in. It would not be practical in this case, nor I don't believe it would be allowed by the state to raise up that approach to the highway. Next thing we need to look at is if we grant these variances, it can't impair the intent and purpose of Chapter 16. So we have all these purpose statements. They're in your packet. I've addressed all of them. I don't intend to go through each one separately unless the committee has specific questions on those. But hopefully everybody understands what's going on here. We have a parcel on the books and we're just trying to make that lot somewhat smaller and more manageable. And doing so, we have to comply with the ordinance. And then lastly, the approval of the variances must not be contrary to Wisconsin statutes or Wisconsin Administrative Code. I don't believe that approval of the variances would be contrary to the statutes or to the code. The application is in here. So I had this up before. This is what's being proposed. I had mentioned that there was documentation by FEMA. So this is the removal document. I'm not an expert on this, but I have read it. I've consulted with Tammy in the zoning office, and there's a small area elevation is listed on here around the home that has been removed. So otherwise, the rest of the property is in floodplain. You can see there's a narrative that was provided by the project surveyor. And then, of course, my staff report. I don't know if I have much else to add. I would like to just at least bring this up. Just a half a minute here. So if everybody knows where Caryville is, if you go just towards the Eau Claire County line from Caryville north and northeasterly, right on the curve here by H, this is the property right here. So this home, you can see it here. There's the home that's in question, some of the outbuildings in the driveway. So just to give you kind of a perspective of where it's at, very close to the Chippewa River. If I turn on the FEMA floodplain layer, you can see the entire property, and a lot of the adjoining property is all within mapped floodplain. You have to get way out here before you're out of the floodplain. So, and again, the subject property sits right here. So the applicant couldn't be here today. The project surveyor had intended to be here, but is not here. So I will do my best to answer any questions the committee might have, and I'll turn it back over to you, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Any questions? Carrie?
That house that wants to be, is there now, is that on lot 2 then?
Correct.
And then lot 1, that would, just be like a wetland, because they couldn't build a road there now, could they, once it's already been there? How could they get to that, lot 1?
Correct. So this will be designated as an outlot for several reasons, right? It's all in the floodplain. Outlot designation means it's non-buildable. And it's given that designation because it's in the floodplain and because it doesn't have any access. It will be retained by the trust who owns the rest of the vacant land over to the west to H. It has to be designated as a parcel though, just because it's a remnant of an existing tax parcel that was surveyed out. So we have two options. We either call it a lot or an outlot, but it doesn't meet lot standards, so therefore it needs to be designated as an outlot. It could be sold at some point in the future to, let's say you, Gary, but it would be very limited what you could do with it. And you would need some type of an access easement to get to it. Right now, access isn't an issue because the person retaining it owns the land to the west who has frontage on 85 and on County Highway H. And the polka dotted area here represents the mapped wetlands. So there's not a lot of usable property out there other than what's currently occupied by buildings.
So I had a related question about that note, about the access easement. So the note on this map on the upper right-hand corner. Yeah, that rectangular note there. So any future independent conveyance of said outlot to a non-adjoining landowner shall include an access easement as part of the conveyance. So that's saying it, the non-adjoining landowner. So if it gets sold to somebody that's not owning that other part, to the left-hand side, that's what that's talking about?
Correct.
Okay, and that access easement would go through not lot 2, but somewhere else?
It could go through lot 2 if the owner of lot 2 would agree to it, but we have a stipulation in our land division ordinance that says you can't bisect a lot with an access easement. So it wouldn't, we've got and no structures are allowed in the easement. So now that leaves you with putting it over on this side, which is a wetland. Access to the state highways, a whole nother conversation. Chances of getting another driveway are very slim. I don't personally see this outlot ever being, never say never, but the likelihood that this outlot is going to get deeded to a non-adjoining landowner, I think is pretty slim. If that does happen, then yes, an easement would have to be designed somewhere and somebody would have to grant that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not automatic. Somebody would have to agree to it. And you may remember when we had the last set of amendments to the land division ordinance, Tony Christopherson was here and this whole topic came up about outlots and access. Because before we amended the ordinance, only lots required frontage on a public road or an access easement 33 feet. And the question came up, well, what about these outlots? Somebody quits paying taxes on this. Now the county's going to get this in REM. We can't access it. It has no value. So we added a requirement that both lots and outlots have to have frontage on a public road or an access easement 33 feet, unless they're going to be retained or deeded to an adjoining landowner, then they would be exempt. And that's why this note is on here. And that note is actually in the ordinance required.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
This makes sense. So in this case, if somebody was considering a sale and they couldn't reach any kind of an agreement with the other landowners about where to put that access easement, that just means that the sale wouldn't happen.
Correct.
Okay.
Especially if a lender's involved, nobody's going to borrow money on a landlocked piece of property. I suppose if you paid cash for it, that's a whole nother situation. But again, I think it's highly unlikely this outlot would be deeded as a separate parcel. If it were, there would certainly be issues that would have to be worked through.
Okay, thank you.
So on that outlot 1, could a guy, because there's a like a landing right by the bridge there, could a guy put a tent up there on that land?
That is a land use question, and I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Because even like on the Red Cedar, there's some spots that you can go on the wetland, but if you have a trailer there, it's gotta be pulled off like at least once a year. That it can't be on there, like the whole year. It's gotta be mobile to be pulled off. But that's when you got access to get to it. But here, just the waterway would be the only access if you're gonna use that outlot 1. So.
Well, they could get permission from lot 2 to use their driveway for that purpose. Couldn't they? Yeah, but you're right, they would be subject to that. Mike,
Yeah, as someone who's been down the river multiple times, there are trailers
Yeah.
that are in spots like this that have been there forever. So it's a possibility, but I don't think they get used much hunting, things like that. My question was, the trust must have then access to those other buildings that are not in lot 2 or 1. I see they're just sheds and
So here's an aerial view. It shows up better on my screen, I guess, than what you're seeing there, but it looks like, yes, there's just a main driveway coming in here, and I don't know what type of obviously there's grain bins here that I'm assuming are still being used. I don't see any other driveways coming off here, so maybe there is just some handshake agreement. I don't know. There's certainly nothing on the survey map showing an easement here that the trust would be reserving to share this driveway to come into the rest of these buildings. So I don't know what that arrangement is. But if the trust intends to use this, then, they had better formalize something with this owner, and maybe that's in the works. I don't know.
but that's nothing we have to be concerned with our actions today.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
anything else? Well, so we have a request for a variance to create that lot 1. And staff has provided us with a review sheet that goes through the requirements and the ways in which they consider the requirements to be met. Do we have any objections to that? And I would maybe a motion to approve the variance and maybe note and the assessment. Do you want that included in there, Tom, or your review of the elements? Just the motion is enough, probably.
I think that 2 separate motions and then action.
So let's do a motion on item 9A on lot 1. Proposed lot 1. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Barry seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Maybe a motion on 9B. This would be on lot 2, proposed lot 2. Is there a motion to approve the variance request on lot for that property?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Supervisor, can you hear seconds? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we are at the budget resolution, legislative resolution. All right about that? I don't have the,
I can do that, Mr. Chair.
okay, Chase, go ahead.
Yep. So thank you everyone for allowing this on the agenda. So if you've been around long enough, or at least through any state budget cycle, you're familiar with the underfunding of county land and water conservation staff. By statute, chapter 92, it describes that the state shall attempt to fund an average of 3 positions in each county to implement the soil and water conservation practices. And that shall attempt will provide funding at 100% of the first position, 70% of the second position, and 50% of the third position and any subsequent positions that a county might have beyond that. The chart you see in front of you there, going back to 2006, describes the funding level, the base funding level that the state has put in place in each budget cycle. And the base funding in 2006 was $9.3 million. And if you fast forward to current year, 2025, the base funding is $8.9 million. So in this time period, we've actually fallen further behind on what the statute requires that the state fund positions such as ours in each county. We've over the years, over the many budget cycles in the past, state budget cycles, we've gained some traction and some clout, if you will, with the state legislature to provide one-time funding in each of the biennial years of the biennium. So while that is appreciated, it still falls short of what the funding need is statewide, in particular in Dunn County. And if you look at the request going into this future budget cycle, the request by our state, Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association works, which we are members of, and they work on behalf of both staff and Land Conservation Committee supervisors, would be to have an increase to the base by a total of, to have a total of $20.2 million in the state budget for base funding. And this will meet the need for all land conservation departments in the state. So I've requested this to be put on the agenda just to bring it to your attention. We are in the budget phase right now where the State Joint Finance Committee will begin its listening sessions or hearings beginning of April. And we are, I guess, we're being asked by our state association what level of assistance each county can provide in advocating for this budget change. The last page in your packet is a very simplified budget action checklist. And it reviews items that we as a county, both committee members, board members, staff can take to support this effort. So I wanted to bring this to your attention. There is a joint finance committee hearing. The two closest to us will be on April 28th in Hayward and April 29th in Wausau. And testifying before Joint Finance Committee is something I have done in the past in my previous position with a different county. So that is an option for you as committee members to participate in. But really the ask here today is to I guess, ask you where you sit on this topic. How would you like to engage? How would you like staff to support you in that engagement, particularly as it comes to advocating for this funding that is directly impacting Dunn County, our Land and Water Conservation Division, and the budget that we have impact or levy that's used to support this underfunding by the state. So I guess with that, I'll leave that for you to discuss right now. If you have any suggestions, I'd be happy to bring anything back at subsequent committee meetings to discuss this topic further. And one last note would be just to remind you, and I'm sure you're all aware, but the Wisconsin Counties Association has made this, I believe, their top 4 priorities for the state budget. So this does have a little bit of weight behind it, more than we've had in the past. So I will stop there and hopefully answer any questions or take advice for your guidance.
Thanks, Chase. Any thoughts from the committee? Gary.
So why aren't the state staying up with the goal? Like from 13 million up to 22 million or 20 million. Why is the state not lagging behind?
Well,
Was that why it's on the agenda, to try to bring attention to them?
yes, I think it's on the agenda today to, again, this is something that we talk about every year. or every 2 years, it seems. And unfortunately, it creates the costs with anything continue to rise. And this underfunding from the state requires more local levy dollars to support the programs and projects that we implement. So why the state is not funding it, the legislature is not putting it into their budgets, is I guess probably simply trying to balance out all the requests that come in across the state to balance a budget, keep a budget reasonable depending on your perspective. And we find ourselves from the county conservation perspective, land conservation departments falling further behind because the priority clearly isn't meeting the statute requirements. So I think we have a lot more traction this time. I know maybe we've said that in the years past, but I don't think we can take our foot off the gas right now to try to support more grant dollars, funding to come back to Dunn County to support our programs.
So we've always supported this in the past as a committee and as a county. And it seems like, to me, it seems like we should be doing whatever we can with, just to add our weight to the scale on this. So one option is to, Jay, so you're thinking that resolution from the county board, sort of a specific an independent request from the county board to the legislature would make sense?
I think that is one option. It's clearly one that carries some weight. I do think that, our local representatives hearing directly from all of you also carries a lot of weight. But as far as action that's a little more tangible and documented, certainly a resolution could be one of those tools, and I'd be happy to draft one and review it with Corporation Counsel and bring it back for future consideration.
Okay, everybody? And it would be good for you to have that. Your testimony at the hearing would be, I think, really valuable. It would be good to have that resolution in hand, if you could, if we can get that to you in time. And I think contacting our legislators, best way to do that, just give them call them or write them individually.
Yeah, I think both of those options are good. And just if I may, as you mentioned earlier with Dunn County's legislative agenda, this topic has been on there since I've been employed for Dunn County, if not longer. Mm-hmm. So I think a nice reminder of that for anyone that has ability to leverage their influence on the state budget would be helpful.
I agree. We all agree. Anything else? Anyone has any? Okay, thanks for bringing this up, Chase. It's I have to ask you a question. It seems like so part of this is that the way they found money in the past is that they use temporary funding, and is that?
Yeah,
okay.
That's they either found it in a temporary fashion in different sources, segregated funds, things like that, where they would just do these one-time, funding at one time in each year of the biennium. And that's great. I mean, it certainly supports us, but it doesn't provide that base funding that we can rely on and be more stable with. So the request this time is for that to meet the need in the base funding.
Okay. We won the battle for a few years, but the war still needs to be finished. Any other questions, Chase? Okay, so we'll get a resolution back to this committee and then on to the board, and we'll do whatever we can personally and provide Chase with an opportunity to present that to the hearing. Anything else? Ken?
In case the committee has not heard, we have a comprehensive plan project going on right now. And our community survey is open. And I just heard from Susan, our numbers, so we have a little over 45,000 residents in the county. And we've had 27 surveys so far. So any help, assistance to get the word out for the comp plan survey would be greatly appreciated. Any ideas that you think I need to be, reaching out to get the word out, just please let me know. But it's a great project that just kicked off. So thought I'd throw that plug in there quick.
Thank you. Okay, anything else, any other announcements or anything else? Okay, then we're adjourned. Thank you.
So how much, Kate get now for those three positions? Because they go like 100%, 75% or down? Yeah, how they are?
Chase, can you